Hey everyone, welcome back to another hardware news recap for the week. For this one, we are talking about our newly listed charity auction for a couple of special PCBs. We're updating you on our GN Factory Tour series that we're bringing back, and don't worry about it. We'll talk about I can't name the thing that we can't talk about because we'll get demonetized again. Also, Intel vulnerabilities for February, Threadripper 3990X world records, Malwarebytes Lab report on Mac threats on the rise. So you can shove that in the faces of all your friends who talk about Mac being impervious to viruses. And then also Intel, AMD, NVIDIA all working together on ray tracing, plus a couple of other items. Before that, this video is brought to you by the new Be Quiet Straight Power 11 Platinum Power Supply Series, available from 550 watts to 1200 watts. The new Straight Power 11 is Platinum certified, operating more efficiently than before, reducing heat and lowering noise levels as a result. The Be Quiet Straight Power 11 Platinum is up to 94.1% efficient and meets the new low power standards of just 0.16 watts when in standby. Learn more about this high-end, noise-focused power supply at the link in the description below. So for the first one, really quickly, we have 3 of these in. I think I'll probably list 2 for now and maybe hold one for a different charity auction later. But we've got 3. I'm going to list them one at a time. We'll post these in the news videos in the description below and then on Twitter and keep you updated. But this is a special PCB only gold and black KINGPIN 2080 Ti board. So this is going up for charity auction. It is signed by KINGPIN, who is basically the world's #1 overclocker. He's got all of the high scores on pretty much everything for at least 3D Mark and 3D related testing, since he is behind the KINGPIN video cards. And then in addition to this, we're going to list this alongside an X299 motherboard from EVGA. It's an X299 Dark. We've got 3 of those, 1 for each of the cards. And we'll also have one of our medium mod mats with it. That'll be signed by my team here. So I'll sign it. Keegan, Patrick, and Andrew, so that's the core team, everyone who's been here for years. We're going to get one of those listed with this and with the X299 Dark, and it'll be a good opportunity to contribute to charity. So all of the money from the charity auctions on this will go to the charities that we detail on their respective eBay pages. I'll have the description in it. It's going to talk about who it's going to. We're going to split it up a bit. But in the past, the mod mat that we just listed and that Linus bought, that one, all the money for that went to Wildlife Rescue South Coast in Australia for wildlife rescue and recovery efforts following the wildfires. This will also be going to a wildlife rescue group in Australia that is focused on saving animals in the way of fire or helping recover the ones who have been injured by it or displaced by it or who no longer have a source of food or water in their habitats that were destroyed. So the funds from this charity auction will be going towards that. The X299 board is functional. You can use it for a build if you happen to want to build an X299 system, and that also comes with a PCB test bench. So it's a blank X299 Dark PCB. It would go great with this PCB. They don't have components on it. I think technically you could probably try to source everything for this and actually build a card, but you'd have to be extremely handy with soldering. But it'd make for a good video if anyone watching is maybe Louis Rossman, basically is what I'm getting at. So anyway, that'll go up there. The link will be in the description below. Check it out, put a bid in. If you actually want to buy it, don't bid on it if you are not going to buy it, because it'll screw me over, because then I'll have to relist it because I can't choose the second highest bidder. I can only give it to the person who wins, and hopefully they're serious about it. Anyway, that'll go to a great cause. We're going to do more of these throughout the year as we try to clear some of our inventory, but also just try to do good things via people we have access to in the industry. Like, again, these KP PCBs, you can't get these anywhere. They are not sold. So it's just a cool piece to have that you could frame or something, because it's got no parts on it and it's gold and black, so it looks awesome. Okay, and thanks to KINGPIN for sending that over and the others. He wanted to help out with the animals in Australia who've been affected by the wildfires, so we are 100% happy to try to work together on doing something good there. Okay, next one, an update on our GN Factory Tour series. Our Factory Tour series that we really put a lot of effort into last year around this time, and it was in March of last year, was pretty popular. We talked about everything from how cases are made at individual component levels. We talked about how tempered glass is made. We even went to a screw factory. Have fun with that one in the comments. And because you didn't think we could get more boring, we also went to a cardboard factory. Anyway, I was later corrected. It's actually a corrugated board factory. But anyway, we are going to be doing a resurgence of our factory tours. Please keep an eye out for it. We're going to be in Taiwan only this time for reasons that got advertising disabled on the previous video because YouTube says it's a controversial issue apparently. I have to avoid saying certain words this time so that AI doesn't grab them in the transcript. But we will not be going to Shenzhen. Let's just kind of do it that way. We won't be going to Shenzhen this time for reasons that should be obvious at this point. It's just not going to be safe, and we're worried about getting stuck more than anything. However, Taiwan sounds perfectly fine. We've talked to a lot of people on the ground there. Everything's operating completely normally. I'm not going to go into more specifics because YouTube, but it sounds good. And the biggest concern we had was if we did a 2-week trip to only Taiwan, we were worried we wouldn't have enough factories to visit to make the trip profitable, frankly. Because Shenzhen, I'm not going to say the country that it's in, because I'm worried about that too, because Shenzhen and areas surrounding it like Huizhou have lots of factories in really close proximity. Taiwan doesn't have as many, so we were able to, through a couple of companies, work out a supply chain tour in Taiwan. We're going to be visiting a power supply factory. That's super cool. We've never gotten to see one of those before, so we'll show you how power supplies are made. We'll be visiting a cooling solution design center where they have engineering for how cooling solutions are made. We're going to be going to some aluminum and steel factories, so raw material processing, and those are the factories that sell their materials to the case manufacturers who then go and bend them or use tooling to turn them into cases. So lots of really cool stuff. Also visiting overclocking labs with hopefully Gigabyte, but definitely EVGA. I mean, same guy who makes this will hopefully be hosting us again in Taiwan. So that's the plan. It's going to be a lot of fun. You don't need to worry about anything. We're staying in Taiwan for this one just because of the situation right now. And it sounds like that area is completely fine and mostly unaffected, at least not any more than the US is. So we'll be good there. And should be a great series. Please check back for it in March and watch it so that we can try and get some money back on it, because it's an expensive trip and the changes have cost a lot. But they're obviously worth it because it's not worth going to 1, empty factories, and 2, being unsafe for everybody, and then 3, getting stranded. So yeah, that's the plan. I think it was a good pivot, and it'll be great content. Next one, Intel vulnerabilities for February. So Intel's official blog posted a story this week on its February security advisories, which is a normal part of its ongoing public disclosures for security vulnerabilities or exploits as they come to light. The typical security disclosure process includes a private disclosure period if it's an external firm that found the vulnerability. They typically have about 6 months where they will disclose it to Intel or whoever it may be, AMD, whatever, and then that company will work on patching or resolving the vulnerability, hopefully within that time frame. And for the most part, no matter what, after the 6 month period or whatever the period is as agreed upon between the two parties, the vulnerability will be made public, whether it's fixed or not. And you saw that really get some spotlight with Meltdown and Spectre a couple years ago. So this is all part of that. The latest Intel advisory is a bit ironic because its current highest severity issue ranked with the severity of 8.2 out of 10 for its vulnerability score and a wording of high or sometimes critical as it approaches the higher numbers. It's actually a vulnerability in its See SME advisory program. And if you don't know what that is or remember it, Intel See SME is called the Converged Security and Management Engine, and it's part of the PCH. It exists within Intel's active management technology, and that was affected. Intel discovered the vulnerability internally and has a new See SME firmware update to resolve the security hole, with the company recommending updates to 12.0.49, 13.0.21, or 14.0.11. And after that, of course, is also fine. Intel describes the vulnerability as follows. Quote, improper authentication in subsystem in Intel See SME versions 12 through 12.0.48, IoT only for 12.0.56, versions 13.0 through 13.0.20, versions 14.0 through 14.0.10 may allow a privileged user to potentially enable escalation of privilege, denial of service, or information disclosure via local access. Important point there. The other 5 vulnerabilities announced today, there's a chart for it on Intel's site, include a USB 3.0 driver advisory ranked at a CVSS score of 6.7, which has received a product discontinuation notice for its driver. Also a RAID Web Console or RWC2 vulnerability, a couple of them found, that could allow for privilege escalation. RWC2 received a product discontinuation notice for the affected driver as well. And then Intel's SGX or software guard extensions also have an escalation of privilege exploit, but are ranked lower in the concerns list because it requires local access and isn't as high of a security vulnerability. But being local access does limit the amount it affects a lot of people in our audience. Obviously still a concern, but for the most part, local access vulnerabilities are things that businesses really need to keep an eye on. Data centers, anyone who's got employees in and out, customers in and out, or someone who physically has access to the system. Generally, if it's a physical local access exploit and computers in your house and they have access to it, then either you've got a social engineering problem with your friends or you have a physical threat to worry about. So we don't really worry as much about those. We want to commend Intel here for its disclosure efforts on its vulnerabilities, for making them public as it does. It's following what's called a coordinated disclosure practice for mitigations and to get them in place faster. Of course, the downside is that it receives a lot of press about this, where some other companies in the space, and I don't just mean silicon companies, they all pretty much follow this. What I really mean is like the software vendors, like Asus making some of its RGB software, for instance, which has vulnerabilities. Some of those companies in the space don't really do this or don't have the means to. So it's good that Intel does the disclosures it does. It'd be ideal to not have as many problems, but that's the way it is for now anyway. Threadripper 3990X world record results up next. So while GN has worked on setting its own world record, at least as far as what we've done here in the past, with the 3990X, there have already been a smattering of other notable overclocking records obtained by, I guess we'll call them professional overclockers. Although Joe Stepanzi, when he visited, tried to get close to the top, we had a couple of hours to work with the processor and we were chicken clocking, as he and Tin call it. So we did pretty well. We did 4.9 gigahertz. You can check our recap on that if you missed it. And for the setup we had, we're happy with that. But obviously there are a lot better overclocks out there. So most notably, TSAIK was able to hit an all-core 5.5 gigahertz using an MSI Creator TRX40 motherboard combined with one stick of DDR4. Other overclockers like Alan, or Splave as he's known by his name, set records for Geekbench 3 and Cinebench R20. SafeDisk set a record for W Prime 1024M and Cinebench R15. And this is all but sure to change at this point, as everybody's working on studying this new chip and trying to even get it because it's expensive anyway. So keep an eye out on that scene. It's cool stuff going on right now. Malwarebytes next. So a new report out of Malwarebytes Labs has found that security threats on Macs outnumber those to Windows at a ratio of 2 to 1. In its State of Malware report for 2020, Malwarebytes Labs assesses security threats for Mac, Windows, iOS, and Android, all based on various outlets for collecting data. Quote, Mac threats increased exponentially in comparison to those against Windows PCs. While overall volume of Mac threats increased year over year by more than 400%, that number is somewhat impacted by a larger Malwarebytes for Mac user base in 2019. However, when calculated in threats per endpoint, Macs still outpace Windows by nearly 2 to 1, the report reads. The report states that among the top 10 threats aimed at Macs, adware and PUPs are the most prevalent. While these types of threats are far from the most malicious, the report insists that they're only going to become more noticeable as a problem, and ardent Mac users will no longer be able to tout how Macs don't get viruses. Of course, the Apple operating system's always been in an interesting position because back when it was much smaller than it is now, it was just a lower population platform to target to begin with. And so you had some security through obscurity almost there. But it's changed as Apple has become as prevalent as it has over the past few years. Anyway, the full report's worth reading. We'll link that in our show notes, linked in the description below. Next up, a rumor of the i7-10700K, continuing with the names. Please, Intel, with a 5.3 gigahertz boost. And actually, I need to address this briefly too. We had a news item a while back where I was talking about AMD big Navi naming, and I said, who cares about the names? And some people were like, but Steve, you always say you care about the names of products that aren't what they say they are. Yes, you are correct. So when I said that, what we were really talking about is who cares about the names that are not even accurate because they were filed by distributors, not by AMD, and so they're all made up and rumors anyway. That's the type of name we don't care about. Now, when it's going to be a real product, we care. So 10980XE, bad naming, obviously, super annoying, not good for consumers. But then more importantly, you get things like the DDR4 versus GDDR5 variants of cards where it's just barely even noticeable that they're different from a naming standpoint, but they're hugely different in performance. That's where it matters too. Anyway, after now addressing that thing that's bugged me for a few weeks, we can go through this story. So everyone's favorite hardware sleuth, Twitter user TUM_API SAK, has found an entry in an undisclosed database, presumably 3D Mark, that shows the looming Intel Comet Lake-based i7 10700K with a boost clock of 5.3 gigahertz, allegedly. The entry itself is rather incomplete, and there isn't a whole lot of meat to this rumor. However, it does start to paint a picture of what frequencies Intel might be targeting with its latest batch of 14nm silicon. The entry shows Intel's 10700K as an 8-core, 16-thread part with a 3.8 gigahertz base clock, allegedly. Interestingly, it looks like Intel may be returning hyperthreading as a standard procedure for its i7 series. Intel caught no shortage of flack for heavily pricing its segmented, hyperthreaded Coffee Lake CPUs, and assuming the veracity of past rumors and leaks, the i7 10700K should slot in directly underneath the i9 10900K, with both sharing equally silly naming conventions. But Steve, you said no one cares about names. And again, yes, that is true. You shouldn't care about names when they're made up by distributors in Russia and they aren't AMD, Intel, or NVIDIA making them. GDC is fast approaching. We used to attend GDC regularly and kind of miss it, actually. It's the Game Developers Conference in San Francisco. Our newly annualized trips to Asia have obviously impacted our ability to go, but the show goes on without us. And one of the discussion panels is entitled Ray Tracing in Vulkan, and it's presented by the Kronos Group. The Kronos Group is the group behind Vulkan, if you don't know already, and it's a collection of people. It's a consortium, sort of. So they're planning a discussion on standardized ray tracing. The panel consists of Intel, NVIDIA, and AMD members all talking together about this topic. And the description states, quote, "The working group will provide an update on the current state of ray tracing efforts, what this means for the graphics industry, and how you'll be able to take advantage of this technology." And as a reminder, when they're using second person there, the audience for this show is game developers, not consumers, so they're talking about it from a development standpoint. We're going to try and keep an eye on this one when it happens. The show runs March 16th to 20th. We're going to be flying home from Taiwan at that point, but we'll try to get some coverage of this up in the news video around when this all happens. Sony's PlayStation 5 manufacturing costs are reportedly high. A new report by Bloomberg suggests that Sony's PlayStation 5 will run a cost close to $450, not price for consumers, but cost, citing an unnamed source that it claims is close to production. We should note here that we have no way to independently verify Bloomberg's reporting at this time. We should also note that Bloomberg doesn't have a particularly strong hit rate for accuracy recently with its technology rumors. It previously reported on spy chips allegedly on motherboards, and that story, it seems, was inaccurate. Anyway, though, assuming Bloomberg is right this time, its primary point is that the PS5 will be tough to get close to Sony's more desirable $400 price point or lower, making it tough to compete. At present, Sony and Microsoft are likely waiting for each other to both make the first move on pricing before they reveal their own. In days long past, console makers used to sell their devices at or very near a loss, typically at a loss, and then they would make their money back on things like licensing fees for video games, where there's a publishing fee of about $10, at least last time we checked, and that adds to the $60 game price instead of $50, but then they can start making back their money when they made a loss on the console itself. And it makes a lot of sense, get the hardware out there and then get them later on the games. So it may be the case that Sony has to return to a loss leader model or close to one. If it hopes to sell the PS5 at a lower price, approaching $500 will be a much tougher sell for consoles, but it's not like they haven't done it before, and even somewhat recently at that. According to Bloomberg's source, it sounds like the primary pricing challenge relates to sourcing DRAM and NAND at an affordable price for this, and also sounds like there's an extra cost for the thermal solution this time, as Sony tries to keep its thermals more under control than some of the more recent consoles have from both vendors, both main vendors. We know some of the reasons, GN knows some of the reasons for the cooling cost increase, but we can't talk about them yet. So as soon as we're able to do a teardown of the PS5, we'll tell you. But until then, we can't really talk about it. It is supposed to be more expensive, though. Stadia finally has achieved negative latency. If you remember, Stadia was bragging about how it'd have negative latency with its streaming games solution, and it turned out that some of the games had over 200 milliseconds of positive latency. So it turns out that Google Stadia's latency issues are not, in fact, restricted to the in-game experience. This time, however, it went the opposite direction. Stadia is running too quickly, and they've achieved their negative latency advertising. So in a news post hyping the newest arrivals to the streaming platform, Google potentially accidentally leaked the Baldur's Gate 3 release date. Google's news post began, quote, "You're already looking forward to Doom Eternal, Get Packed, Orcs Must Die 3, and Baldur's Gate 3, and end quote. Prior to this post, no official release information had been released about Baldur's Gate 3. For those unaware, the Baldur's Gate franchise goes back 20 years, though the older titles have since been revamped and remastered for good old games. And now, Larian Studios, the minds behind the highly praised Divinity series, is taking a stab at fully resurrecting the Baldur's Gate name through an original release. If you don't know, the Divinity series, one of the probably last games I did a full proper review on before transitioning completely to hardware, was Divinity 2. I think it was called. It might have been, I think the full name might have been Divine Divinity 2 or something, but really good game, loved it. So anyway, they're working on this one. Until now, most of the news about Baldur's Gate 3 has come through the Twitter of Larian's CEO, Sven Vinke, but Google is putting the release of Baldur's Gate 3 to be in about 2020. Finally, a small news item for you. EKWB's Pro line has gotten an introduction. So we've worked with the EK water blocks on numerous occasions over the years, most recently in production systems that we built with BPS Customs, then also at CES, we visited their suite and took some footage there too. The Slovenian company has specialized in open loop cooling for enthusiasts for about 20 years now, and they're turning their eyes more to the professional sector. The new EK Pro line of products includes two manifolds, one for supporting two CPUs and two GPUs, and the other two for CPUs, two CPUs and four GPUs at €75 and €90 respectively. In addition to the manifolds, EK is releasing CPU and GPU quick disconnect kits at €90 a piece. And last, but most interesting for us, the EK Pro line is rounded out by the EK FC GB100 Pro water block, a water block built to support NVIDIA's GB100 line of GPUs, which includes the Quadro GB100, Tesla V100, and Titan V. The water block is purpose-built to cover the entire card and, quote, cool all critical components. EK promises more workstation products to be announced soon after these releases, and hopefully during this we can show some of our footage from their suite at CES. They always have a pretty cool suite there, but they had some professional products too, and there's more in the Quadro line coming out. So that's it for this news video. Thanks for watching. Check out the charity auction, link to the description below, and make sure you subscribe so you catch our factory tours. It's a massive expense for us. It approaches something like $10,000 after you account for travel, staffing expenses, all that stuff. But well worth it. Extremely cool content, and it's just it gets us excited about working with hardware. So also informs our reviews. So check back for that. Subscribe for more. Go to store.gamersnexus.net to help us out directly, where through the 19th, we are still giving 10% of the gross revenue from the store to Australian wildlife charities, or you can go to patreon.com/gamersnexus. Thanks for watching. We'll see you all next time.